crazy hot. Ultimately, the peel is just a barrier, but it's not a huge one. That means the reaction time is affected, not the steady state performance. The time to steady state was 350 seconds with the wrapper covering the thermal pad, or 385 with it removed. That's an extra 35 seconds of time before we were at steady state when properly connected. This isn't catastrophic, it doesn't ruin the build, but it's an error that affects the thermal performance.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. Let me look at that again. This pre-built benchmark suffers Ryzen temperature reasons versus wrapper. Okay, it's a big no. Yeah, I mean yeah.
Performance. Our first testing for the system will start in our newly constructed hemi-anechoic sound chamber. The Starforge system has a relatively slow ramp where the hysteresis that's pre-configured, which responds to thermals, is a lot slower than we see in some of the other pre-builds that we've reviewed. So that's what we're going to be looking at first in this chamber, which we have a whole separate video on if you're interested.
Oh, it's one of those. Yeah, I know what it is. Okay. Now, 35 seconds can be a whole generation difference. Yeah, no, 35 seconds. I mean, like, what are we going to spend a lot of time talking about, like, whether the tape should have been there or not? Everybody knows it shouldn't have been there. And so, yeah, I mean, is it something that bricks the PC? No. Is it something that makes it a bit worse? Yes.
And it is very quiet in here. For this testing, we did this at 1 meter distance, which is part of an ISO standard. And after all that's set up, we go through, turn on the test apparatus, turn on the systems out there, and run the data logging. So that's the test setup. Now, as for the chamber itself, these are metal wedges. They're perforated metal wedges. Inside of them is effectively fiberglass. And this allows us to kill a lot of the echo in the room, hence the name anechoic. So the anechoic part of the hemi-anechoic name comes from basically the walls and from the ceiling construction where we have these wedges to help kill some of that noise. So when I'm talking, my voice is really only making one pass to the walls, gets captured, the sound waves get destroyed or scattered, and we're not really getting much return. And that's especially true in the higher frequency ranges you'll see in a computer. Now, higher here being relative. Now, the hemi part of hemi-anechoic, that comes from the floor.
Holy shit.
So the floor is a hardened surface. This is basically a vinyl tile. As for other features of the chamber, it's built on 3 Hertz isolating springs, and that allows us to just further isolate it from the ground and from noises from the outside of the building. On top of the chamber, we have insulation stacked to further reduce external noise, and surrounding it, we use special Armstrong ceiling tiles for the same purpose. The chamber also utilizes 8-foot silencers on either side in the event we run air handles.
Bro, what the fuck is this? This is insane.
And for our single point of noise ingress, we use 2 heavy gauge steel doors that nest and are packed with insulation, including more wedges on the backside. Between the instrumentation, the external room, and the measurement equipment, and the construction, and the complicated chamber itself, we spent about $250,000 on this testing equipment and have been thrilled with the results so far, and we're really only just getting started. Here's the first chart. This is simply for noise levels over time. This system ran at 22.4 dBA at the start when idle, so we'd classify that as quiet for household usage. The fan ramp took place over a period of about the entire 30-minute cycle, but mostly stabilized at around the 10 to 15-minute mark. You can see that the total noise level when left fully auto ran at about 31 dBA. This is completely acceptable. And what we're looking for here really is fan ramp and deramp, which can become annoying as it oscillates. And that doesn't happen with this system. Instead, it's a gradual gain with a slowed start in the first 5 minutes. Now we're going to move to frequency spectrum analysis.
Oh, thank God. All right, we're good. That's an easy. Yeah, it is. There we go.
You know what?
We're only hearing about it because it's
2007. Lindsay had contacted Tatsuya a couple days prior, and they'd arranged for their first English lesson in a local coffee shop. CCTV captured the two conversing while in the queue to grab a drink. Lindsay seemed relatively relaxed, but she did make clear steps backwards whenever Tatsuya moved too close. The pair sat and spoke for what is assumed to be a little over an hour, and progress was good. At the end of it though, Tatsuya awkwardly pointed out that he'd forgotten his money. "No worries," he said, "I only live half a mile down the road. Why don't you come by and grab your money, and then be on your way?" Lindsay agreed, and so the two hopped into a taxi. Lindsay hadn't brought a bike with her that day, and she also had work later on in the afternoon. So when she arrived at Tatsuya's, she asked the taxi driver if he'd be so kind to wait for her. He agreed, and so Lindsay followed Tatsuya into his apartment. Several minutes later though, Lindsay still hadn't returned. That's a little strange, the taxi driver thought, but maybe she's had a change of plans. No worries, and so on that note, he left, completely forgetting about the incident. Lindsay failed to show up to work late that afternoon, however. And even worse, she never made it back to her apartment either. Her housemates, already noting that she wasn't at work that day, started to worry about Lindsay. They called the police later that night to report her missing. But Saturday turned into Sunday, and Sunday turned into Monday. The family and friends of Lindsay back home in the United Kingdom were already starting to grow worried over her radio silence. It was only after Monday though, when she missed a second day of work, that panic really started to set in. The school contacted her parents to let them know that she had now missed 2 days in a row, and straight after that they contacted the police. It was only then though that the police started taking Lindsay's disappearance a little more seriously. Police search efforts started at Lindsay's home, and her housemates were the first to be interviewed. And with luck, they already had a suspect in mind. They knew that Lindsay went to see a man in a coffee shop shortly before she disappeared, and she'd also left his sketch back in the apartment. This was their first clue. It was around 5:40 PM that 2 officers were dispatched to Tatsuya's home, but after knocking on his door, no one answered it. His neighbours though were at home, and kindly they let officers peer over from the balcony and into Tatsuya's living room. There were no lights on in the property, but there did appear to be somebody lurking around inside. And weirdly enough, his detachable bathtub had been moved from the bathroom to the balcony. On a hunch, the 2 officers called for backup. They were worried that maybe Lindsay was inside being held hostage, and within the hour, 7 more officers arrived. 3 hours and 9 officers later, and police were getting ready to raid Tatsuya's home. It was then in a surprise moment that Tatsuya opened his front door, with a rucksack in bare feet. In that split moment of panic, Tatsuya stormed past police. They tried to grab him but only managed to get his rucksack. Tatsuya himself slipped by. They didn't manage to keep up with Tatsuya either. With the building's hallways being so narrow and confusing, he managed to get by. And with police officers lacking any radio equipment, they lost all sight of the man. So, in the middle of Tokyo City, Tatsuya vanished into the night. It was as if the man had literally disappeared into thin air, because Tatsuya was nowhere to be found. Police officers investigating his property just moments later would be in for a gruesome scene. There they had found the naked body of Lindsay Hawker. She was found buried in Tatsuya's detachable bathtub, which he had moved himself to the balcony. The tub had been filled with a mixture of sand and soil, almost entirely covering Lindsay, with only her right hand emerging from the surface. She had been bound and gagged, with plastic ties and scarves, and bruises were present across her upper body. In her final hour, she had been subjected to an extended assault, her possessions still scattered across the room. Along with the body, sand and soil in the balcony bathtub, it also contained a decomposing agent to speed up the process of decomposition. And flower seeds were placed on top to disguise the bathtub as a flower bed. The seeds eventually would be feeding off Lindsay's body. To add to the harrowing discovery, it was also strangely noted that Tatsuya had shaved all of Lindsay's hair off of her head. Police would also discover several wigs in Tatsuya's apartment, alleging that perhaps he was a crossdresser. This quickly became public knowledge, and soon after, rumours even started circulating to suggest that maybe Tatsuya had killed Lindsay to wear her hair as a wig. By the next morning, Tatsuya Ichihashi was officially a wanted man across all of Japan. Police distributed wanted posters across the city. His face was shown across multiple news sites. Interviews given to anyone who may have potential information. And raids were witnessed at locations of possible sightings of the suspect. But despite all efforts, just like a ghost, Tatsuya was nowhere to be seen. Hardly any sightings of the man were reported over the following weeks. In fact, all of them turned into dead ends. Police were so keen to capture the suspect though that they decided to release photoshopped images of Tatsuya wearing wigs, just in case he was out in drag. But Tatsuya was good at remaining unnoticed. In fact, he was so good at evading the police that his disappearance turned from weeks, into months, into years. And this frustrated Lindsay's family, because in addition to the relentless pain that they had to experience from the loss of their daughter, was the feeling that her killer got away. It was not just that, but they also felt that Japanese police were growing lazy and sloppy in their investigations. It angered Lindsay's parents so much actually that, just months after her death, the two would travel to Japan and single-handedly assist in raising awareness of Lindsay's killer. Her father, Bill, even met members of the Japanese mafia, the Yakuza, in a bar, giving them 2 bottles of whiskey as a present before asking them for their help. And as time went on, Japanese police soon found themselves in the centre of the spotlight. How did 9 police officers let one man slip by? Why did they take a month to quiz vital witnesses? And did they know that their wanted poster had a picture 7 years out of date? Police and the Hawker family would slowly start to argue against each other, and soon British and Japanese media were involved too. And while all of this was happening, Tatsuya was still out there. He had actually travelled across most of Japan during his time on the run. Ranging from Aomori, one of the most northern cities on Japan's main island, right down to the southern island of Okinawa, Tatsuya had remained unnoticed. He even lived on a remote island in a concrete bunker at times to avoid detection too. A year after Lindsay's death in 2008, and right through 2009, Tatsuya found himself in Osaka. Located 250 miles west of Tokyo, Osaka is a large port city and a commercial centre to Honshu. It's known for its modern architecture, nightlife, and hearty street food. It was during this time that Tatsuya routinely lived in internet cafes and worked on construction sites to get by. With the money that he could save up, he would put that towards plastic surgery to change his appearance and avoid being caught by the law. However, he had actually already changed his appearance through self-mutilation ever since becoming wanted by the law. He'd cut off his moles, used scissors to cut off part of his lower lip, and eventually sewed a thread through his nose to alter its shape. By the summer of 2009, police were painfully desperate to find Tatsuya. It was here that the National Police Agency raised the cash reward for information leading to the arrest of him from 1 million to 10 million yen. They also released a new statement advising it was believed that Tatsuya had plastic surgery performed to his face to alter his appearance, and that people should be on the lookout for resemblances of Tatsuya's special identifications. And it worked, because in October 2009, a plastic surgeon located in Nagoya informed police that he believed that he had just worked on Tatsuya. Tatsuya had foolishly accepted to take a before and after picture of his operation. The same photos would be shared with police and eventually the world. This rattled Tatsuya. He knew that the newly released photos by police had blown his cover. In fact, it was so successful that one of his colleagues back at a construction site in Osaka recognized him. Tatsuya knew that he had to get out of Osaka and hide fast. His plan was as he had done before in several other close calls. Flee to Okinawa and take refuge in one of the abandoned concrete bunkers found across its many remote islands. On the 10th of November 2009, he discreetly fled to Osaka's ferry port. 3 days of keeping his head low on a slow ferry to Okinawa, and he would finally be in a much safer position away from justice. But before he could even reach the boat, Tatsuya's luck would finally run out. A worker at the ferry port had actually recognised his face and informed security that this could very well be the Ichihashi. And they were right, because only moments later, Tatsuya came face to face with a handful of officers. They asked him for his name, and at this stage he knew it was over. He told them, yes, I am Tatsuya Ichihashi. The game was over. He was then formally arrested by police and was initially charged with abandoning a body. He would later be served 2 more warrants for rape and murder. And it would take 8 months for him to finally meet his jury. On the 4th of July 2011, his trial began. And with the outcome pretty certain from the very beginning, deliberation wouldn't last long. A lot of attention was focused on how Japan's court system would punish Tatsuya. Although Japan does enforce the death penalty, not a lot of single-person murderers find it to be their fate. But Tatsuya was a well-publicised man in the media, and many voices supported the idea. During his trial, Tatsuya admitted that he enticed Lindsay into his apartment, raped her, and then strangled her because he feared neighbours would hear her scream and call the police. On the 21st of July 2011, Tatsuya Ichihashi was officially sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Lindsay Hawker. And although Lindsay's family had asked for the death penalty for Tatsuya, the court felt that the death penalty was not appropriate as he had no previous convictions. And at the age of 32, there was still a chance that he could one day become rehabilitated. The trial would not come without its fair share of new devastation and pain to Lindsay's family, however. Not only would they have to relive her final moments again, but they would also have to see new images of Lindsay's body, something they regret ever seeing. Following Tatsuya's sentence, Lindsay's parents shared the following to state media. We've waited a long time for today. We've waited 4.5 years for justice. Lindsay loved Japan, and you have not let her down. Ichihashi, you have taken away a precious life, destroyed a whole existence, and stolen countless memories from us. The verdict, which puts Tatsuya behind bars for life, was welcomed by most people in the nation, and Tatsuya himself accepting his own fate. Shortly before trial, Tatsuya had actually authored and published a book confessing to Lindsay's murder. Most of his biography describing how he'd spent 2.5 years on the run, and what he had to do to avoid detection. The book, which was named Until I Was Arrested, was offered with all royalties and profits to Lindsay's family, and over 100,000 copies would sell worldwide. But Lindsay's family rejected the offer, and despite Tatsuya's strange attempt at a good deed, nothing could bring them back their daughter. Lindsay was well loved, successful, cheerful, and irreplaceable. She was in the middle of an incredible experience abroad, doing good by teaching others a valuable new skill. And in the end, it was her kindness that was used against her by a strange, heartless man. She will be dearly missed by her parents, her sisters, and all of her friends. Thank you so much for watching another video today.
Every time I make a video about right to repair or show the roadblocks when it comes to repairing electronics, there's always a small group of people who truly believe the inability of repairing your own devices is being done in your best interests. With the erosion of the right to do whatever you want with something you purchased, that is somehow a step in the right direction. Over the years, there's been a few arguments as to why, these often surrounding safety, security, and theft protection. But as we'll discuss, there's little to no merit to these claims. You may have heard of the term "there's no argument to safety." Whether it's a politician or company, safety is often used as a way to push an agenda by creating fear. In the case of electronics, it's the fear someone might injure themselves if they're allowed to fix the device. While totally possible to injure yourself fixing a phone or tablet, really anything can injure you. Should a pencil be classed as dangerous because it's sharp and the end could hurt you if it's misused? No, because that would be ridiculous. The only real danger to phone repair is lithium batteries, which, if significantly charged and are damaged, can violently combust. But this isn't really an example of why people shouldn't repair their own things, but proof that manufacturers are designing their devices in such a way that it endangers their users. It wasn't long ago that removable batteries were common, but it was realized that by making